Writing is looking for the links between the fantasy of your novel and the reality of your everyday life. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tara East. I'm a writer, blogger, YouTuber, and the author of the mystery novel Every Time He Dies. And in today's video, I'm gonna bust 5 common myths about writing. At the start of December, Caroline Donahue, host of the podcast The Secret Library, released a series of private emails to her newsletter subscribers dispelling 5 common myths that her clients and herself have encountered. Now, I loved this idea and devoured the series, and if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then Caroline should be very flattered because I'm about to dispel my own 5 myths about writing. While I know that these 5 myths are totally false, I forget, and there are things that I need constantly reminding of, and maybe you need a little reminder too. So the first myth I want to bust is create a routine and stick to it. Having a reliable writing routine that you can lean on is of course really great. But the thing is, things change and your needs change. When the routines in our lives change, hello 2020, then our creative routine must change as well. Taking on extra clients, picking up some night work, getting a dog, moving offices, all of these things are things that could totally upend your life. Not even to mention huge things like having a baby or moving house. Writing for an hour before work may no longer be possible now that you have a dog that needs daily walks. Working after dinner but before you go to bed may go down the sink once you start a new relationship. Writing sessions with your sprint buddy might vanish if you move towns. And sometimes, and this is really frustrating, nothing external changes, but for whatever reason, the routine that was working has stopped working or it's become really stale. Routines can be tremendously supportive, but they can also become stale and prison-like when you stick with them for too long. And a routine is only useful if it actually works. Adapting our routines to our external and internal needs is totally essential if we want to keep producing words, if we want to keep writing stories. Having a flexible routine means that you don't have to abandon writing if your boss wants you to start at 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., or if your weekly critique groups are no longer feeling useful. Ritual is lovely, but ultimately, the less parameters you have around your writing routine and the looser you sort of hold these, the better. Myth number 2, writing is lonely. Writing doesn't have to be lonely, and good writing is rarely done alone. Most writers receive a whole host of support, whether it be personally and practically from loved ones, such as a partner that makes you a cup of tea, kids that make their own lunch, parents or friends that ask how your work is going, or you might receive that support in a way that is creative and professional, such as beta readers, writing groups, editors, or a literary agent. The author's name is the only one that appears on the front cover, but there's a reason why the acknowledgement page exists. Because there was a whole slew, a whole village of people that helped make that book happen. Now, speaking from my own experience, some of the best ideas and best work I have produced is when I have invited somebody else into the creative process. Sometimes this looks like brainstorming an idea with a friend, because why limit yourself to only the experiences you have had? It can also mean emailing a manuscript to beta readers and critique partners. Now, often I'll actually even find myself reading a book and just thinking, how did they do that? And then I start to pull it apart and try and find the threads of how the author did the thing. And occasionally, for me, it's also been hour-long conversations with someone who is more skilled than me, who is better read than me, and with more expertise or with different expertise than my own. Good writing is actually the result of collaboration. Number 3, you'll feel like a real writer after releasing your first book. As it turns out, imposter syndrome never goes away. At least that's been my experience and the experiences of other writers I know, and even ones that I don't know. Every book is different, and you are different in the writing of that book. So making every book feels kind of like the first book. Well, look, okay, that's a slight exaggeration. After you've written your first book, you will of course understand basic foundational stuff like how structure works, how plot and characterization and other elements work, because you've written that first book, so you'll be able to carry these lessons over into your second book. However, while you know how plot works, you need to figure out how it's going to work in this story, because the plot will be different. The characters will also be different, and maybe this time you want to stretch yourself and expand and maybe try a different style or voice, or challenge yourself to use language in a different way. If you're trying to stretch your abilities, you will be plagued by self-doubt. This is the perils of creativity, because the inner critic loves to point out all the ways that you are coming up short, however true or not true those points may be. As writers, we know that we can't be objective about our own work. We can't always tell if a scene is boring or interesting, if it's subtle or confusing. And this sort of underscores the previous myth that writers are alone, and this sort of underscores my previous point that writers work alone. The truth is, we actually need to work with people, because in working with people, we're able to see our work more clearly. How many more times could I say work in that sentence? Sharing our writing with others heightens our vulnerability, and it's a unique fear that we don't really carry into other activities like hanging out the laundry, because we care about writing, and it is in some ways and not in others a representation of ourselves. Myth number 4, the only thing that counts as writing is the words on the page. Or put another way, writing is writing. Now, for a really long time, I used to think this way too, that writing only happened during writing sessions, that was the only thing that ultimately counted. But this is a hard and really ungenerous way to view your creativity. And as time goes on, I also feel that it's distinctly untrue. Fingers flying over keyboards isn't writing, it's typing. Of course, I fully acknowledge that some realizations really do only happen in the act of writing. But there are just as many aha moments that happen away from the keyboard. Writing is thinking and reading, daydreaming, and having coffee with a friend. It's watching a movie or doing the dishes. Writing is paying attention to your life while holding the story close. Writing is looking for the links between the fantasy of your novel and the reality of your everyday life. Writing sessions are the distillation of these creative miracles manifested onto the page in an unraveling tale with an inevitable conclusion. Additionally, not all writing is equal. Different stages require different skills and mindsets and approaches. The way you write your first draft is very different to how you begin the revision process, and later the final proofread. First drafts are about story, i.e. plot and maybe characterization, depending on your writing style. Revision is about critical analysis. What isn't working and how can I fix it? Proofreading is all about checking for consistency and repetition, making sure the character doesn't have the same point in chapter 5 as they did in chapter 2. And it's also about all the nuts and bolt elements around grammar and punctuation and sentence structure. Now we've reached our final myth, myth number 5. Writing is either fun or torture. Now, the reason why this is a myth is because most days aren't tremendously fun or tremendously torturous. It's just nestled somewhere in between. On bad days, writing can feel like any other task on your to-do list. but I would sort of phrase it this way, where it feels like having coffee with a friend who you see all the time. So there is a part of you that wouldn't kind of mind cancelling and just hanging at home in your PJs and putting in a whole lot less effort, because hell, you only saw that person last week. But you also know that if you put in the effort, if you get dressed and get out the door and see your friend, you'll have a really good time. The truth is, writing often feels fine. It often feels perfectly okay. Though, I have to admit, writing sessions are often bookended by 5 minutes of dread before you begin, and 5 minutes of prideful relief when you finish. And that's all I have for you this week, guys. Those are my 5 myths of writing busted. If there are any myths about writing you would like to bust, please leave them in the comments below, because I'd love to hear all about it. Now, if you'd like even more writing advice, you can head to taraeast.com and dive into the archives, or check out some of my videos on this channel. If you join my email newsletter, links on my website, I'll also send you a free gift, and you'll receive a short weekly email from me with a bunch of goodies that I only share via email. I hope you have a good week, that you read everything, and that you keep writing, because the world actually does need more books. Stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you next week.